What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to Showing Tech. So sitting right here in front of me, I have the 2020 M1 MacBook Air, and this one here is just the base model. Now, you might be wondering why I bought a MacBook Air when I already have a MacBook Pro. So the MacBook Pro that I bought back in the spring of this year was the Intel version of the MacBook Pro 2020. All I did with that one was I had increased the RAM from 8 gigs to 16, and I thought that was going to be a perfect device for the courses that I was taking online, as well as for creating all of the content for my channel. Now, when the M1 MacBook Airs came out, I was kind of disappointed at first that, I went for the Intel version. I could have waited a little bit and grabbed myself an M1 MacBook Pro, but after seeing all of the reviews and how much people are loving the MacBook Air and all the things that this is capable of, I sort of decided that I would settle on this model for now. Now, another consideration that I had was this is my iPad Pro 2020. And so far, this has been a fantastic device. I mean, it's really done everything from editing the videos on my channel using LumaFusion, editing any photos that I take in Lightroom, and then just any videos that I want to watch, movies, whatever have it. Like, it pretty much does everything. So I've been considering for a long time just buying a Magic Keyboard attachment for my iPad Pro and calling it a day. But I'm not quite sold on that yet because I do feel like there's definitely going to be a time when I want to go back to Final Cut Pro 10 and I want to go back to doing things that only a laptop can do. So I picked up the MacBook Air, and luckily with my MacBook Pro having been slightly upgraded and from this year, the price that I sold that MacBook Pro for actually covered the price of the MacBook Air still and then some. So I think I came out on top with this downgrade slash upgrade because I'm pretty sure that the performance on this is still going to be better somehow than my Intel Mac Pro. But that's enough talking for me. I know you guys have already seen a number of unboxings on this, so I'm not going to do the whole overhead view thing. I'm just going to pop it open right here and take a look at it. So the M1 MacBook Airs aren't going to be any different than what you're used to seeing in terms of the build quality and the overall structure of the chassis. So everything here is pretty much the exact same. I'm not losing out on much by going with the Mac Air versus the model of the MacBook Pro that I had, because the Mac Air and my Mac Pro both only had the 2 USB ports that you can see here. So I didn't upgrade to the newer, more expensive chassis from before, and I was totally fine just having those 2 USB ports. So right inside the box, there you can see the MacBook Air. And one thing that bothers me about this, I was joking about it with my wife, but I really do wish that I had ordered the rose gold version. At first I thought it looked kind of silly, but the more I see it, the more I think about it, the more that's the one that I actually wish that I had bought. So inside the box, it's the same old stuff. So you get a charging brick, and this brick is actually smaller than I'm used to seeing. So I don't know if maybe the Mac Airs ship with a smaller brick, but this one is tiny. I'll probably still be using my brick that Anchor sent me, and I'll put a link to that video in the description for you guys. And then you also get a USB-C, I won't take it out, a USB-C to USB-C cable in the box. So nothing special there. But what's most important here is the M1 MacBook Air. So a couple things that I'm excited about when it comes to this model. Number one, it's a lot lighter than the MacBook Pro was. So in terms of portability, you're really gaining if you decide to go my route and get rid of your Mac Pro for a MacBook Air. Number two, one thing that I really didn't like about the MacBook Pro, and I'll open this here, hopefully it doesn't make too loud of a noise when I do. It's kind of hard to do. There we go. Nice. So another thing that is great about the MacBook Airs, in my opinion, that I didn't like about the MacBook Pro was that the Air has the physical F keys at the top, whereas the Pro had that touch bar. And I don't know, maybe some people out there find that touch bar useful. I found it to be useless. I'm really glad that I don't have to worry about that anymore. This keyboard setup to me just looks so much more clean and so much more useful. So it looks a lot better to me. I like how everything is spaced out. and not having that touch bar, in my opinion, is excellent. So the reason why I decided to switch from my Intel MacBook Pro down to an M1 MacBook Air is because it's really not that much of a downgrade if you think about it. So I know that when we hear the term MacBook Pro, we think of higher performance, we think of a higher cost and a better overall design. But I think this year is a bit of an anomaly in that the M1 chip is really a lot more powerful than people were expecting. So yes, you lose out on some functionality if you're somebody that uses those apps that have been so well integrated with the Intel chip. So if you're using something like Adobe Photoshop, for example, or if you are using something like Premiere Pro, then you're gonna have a couple issues for the next few years in terms of compatibility and just ease of use and efficiency. But if you're an average person, maybe you create content sometimes, or you're somebody like me who does create content, but you use things like Final Cut and web-based applications like Lightroom, or you have another fully dedicated desktop computer, whatever it might be, then going down to the MacBook Air really isn't a downgrade at all. And like I've said a number of times, and you've probably heard it before, but the performance on the MacBook Air is actually vastly improved. So you're able to actually do a little bit of gaming on this. You can still get those renders out quickly if you're deciding to use Premiere even still, but I would suggest going over to Final Cut. The battery life on this is apparently insane, where people are heavily using the laptop for 2 days without needing to charge it. So there's just so much upside to going down to what's known to be, or used to be known as, the lesser model in the Air, the model that's more for your average consumer versus something that is dedicated to a pro creator. I really think that those two distinctions now are very blurred for the average person who might start dabbling into those more creative processes. So at the end of the day, you're able to sell your MacBook Pro for a pretty substantial price still if it's a newer MacBook Pro or if it's one that's been heavily upgraded. And the price of the M1 MacBook Air is still going to come in under that, and you get to keep all of that money still in between while having a device that's going to do all the things that you used to do on your MacBook Pro anyway. So at least that's the way that I've thought about it when I went about making that switch myself. And then another thing that I was really looking forward to is the typing experience. So on the MacBook Pro, the typing was fine. I mean, everyone talks about the Magic Keyboard. I said in my last video, to me, the Magic Keyboard really doesn't mean much. I mean, I'm happy with the keyboard so long as it's responsive. It's probably more so the people that came from that butterfly switch keyboard, which was really flat and had no depth when you pressed a key. So in terms of the Magic Keyboard overall, I really don't care. What I like about this is if you look at the wedge-shaped design. So it starts off larger up here and then tapers down as you get to this other side, which means that when you have it flat on a table and you're actually typing on it, it lends itself to a better typing experience because the keys are slightly elevated on that angle. Whereas on the Mac Pro, there was no taper, it was completely flat. And so at times it kind of got annoying with that little rubbing that you got on the base of the keyboard. So overall, I think that this is going to be a better experience when it comes to that. That's pretty much it for this video. I'm gonna go ahead, set it up. If you are wanting to see anything specific or you want a review of the differences that I've noticed from the MacBook Pro going down to a MacBook Air, or even just what considerations I made when making this choice, because maybe you want to do the same thing, or perhaps you're looking at buying a Mac computer for somebody that you know as a gift and you can't really decide which one might be most suitable for them, then feel free to leave a comment down below for me and I'll do my best to either answer your questions or get a full video up on that in the future. But that's been it from me with my new M1 MacBook Air. Super excited to get this guy going. So much love as always, throwing up 2 of them, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.